Hi folks, it's Ivo here from Thundermist Lure Company. Great to see you and welcome to today's episode of Thundermist Fishing Tips. Glad you could join me because today we're going to talk about a very simple subject, and that is how to find fish, where to fish, good spots to fish, and how to find them. So for that I've got my glasses on because we're going to actually look at a map and we're going to look at some spots and some strategies in finding fishing spots. But in the meanwhile, I just want to answer a question from Lex Waldez, who asked me, how do you use your fish finder? And John Horth, who also asked, when you use your fish finder, do you look for fish marks or do you look more for structure? Well, I use my fish finder to find structure and for depth, but I also use it to find marks. If I'm fishing for salmon and I'm in 300 feet of water, you want to find those salmon, you want to find out what depth they are. You might see you're marking them at 120 feet, you'll see the arches. That's when I'll look for arches. But if I'm fishing typically for walleye or bass, I'm going to look for structure. Changes in the bottom, rock to mud transitions, depth changes, any sort of irregular bottom, any structure that you could find the structure, chances are you're going to find the fish. So most of the time I'm looking for structure. That's key to me. I'll also look for bait fish as well, but I don't put as much emphasis on marking fish. Okay, so now let's take a look at a map and find some fishing spots. Okay, so here we see a map of Lake St. Clair, which happens to be shared between Canada and the USA. And overall, just take a look at this map overall. This area here looks pretty boring. Not a lot happening in this section. And then we have lots of excitement going on over here. But we're going to take a look at finding spots in, let's say, in this more boring area where there's maybe not as much structure as you would find here, but we're going to walk our way through this map and we'll take a look at what are the best spots to fish in these areas. Okay, so if we're going to start at this end here, first of all, anytime you have, this is the Detroit River, and anytime you have a river or a creek connecting to a body of water, that area, the mouth of that area is typically always good. Now, we're going to work our way down this way, but as I work our way down here, I see these green X's, which are weeds. So we've got weeds here, and then I see here an R for rock, and then I see here an S for sand and an R for rock. So we've got rock, sand, sand, there's sand here, rock here, weeds here. What a perfect combination. So we're moving now between sand, rock, and weed. This area right out in front of these weeds would be prime area to fish. It's like a fish magnet right there. Okay, let's keep working our way along this boring edge and see what else we could find. So from this spot here, we can move our way. As we come into this area, you see here, you can see that line, that underwater line, which is marking more or less a 10-foot depth, and you can see how it goes here. It's almost an underwater point right here. So this deeper water at 14 feet, from 10 feet to 14 feet, that would be a nice little area to fish, an underwater point. Then we come down here and we see, okay, here's another river. Here's the Bell River coming in here, and I see some weeds, and I also see a sand and rock. Anytime you see sand to rock transition, that's a great spot. And in this spot, there's sand, rock, and also weed. So I would fish on the outside of those weed beds. That's a perfect little spot to hone in on. And then, oh, look at this. You've got a sand and mud transition here. But look at this underwater point. Remember we talked about that one there? Here's an underwater hump right here. And look at that hump. It's got weeds on it. And there's sand here and clay here. So again, you've got sand to clay, you've got weeds, you've got structure, underwater hump. There'll be a nice little incline there. There'll be a break. You could fish either side of that. That's a great spot to fish, just looking at the map. And then continuing down here, here's another, again, anytime a river dumps into a lake, it's a natural spot to fish. And I see some weeds here, I see some sand. I don't see any transitions, but this weedy area could be a good spot because it's out in front of here. Okay, let's work our way along here further. So here we have another river. That's great. It's coming out into the lake here, the Thames River. And I see here, I see some activity. I see stumps, I see weeds, I see more weeds on this side. I see some obstructions here, possibly rocks. So there's a lot going on in this area, but if we notice, the stumps here and the weeds here seem to be a little more than on this side of the river. So I would concentrate more on this side of the river. And in fact, I see close to shore here, B for boulders, mud, and then I see the stumps and the weeds. So this area here, and then I see more weeds. I see a deep weed. So you could concentrate and work on this deep weed edge on that side. And then look at what we have here. 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5 green X's right here. So what we're seeing here is an isolated weed bed. Those are like fish magnets because there's nothing else around, so they're going to key in on that weed bed. So if you had an electric motor, you can just work around that weed bed and concentrate on that area very, very nicely. Okay, let's continue to work our way up because we have lots of activity up here. So now we're getting into a lot of activity. If you look here, this place called Mitchell's Bay, we've got a river coming into it. There are stumps, a lot of shallow water. I see stumps here, weeds here. But what interests me in this particular area is look at this 10-foot line here coming through like this, and then it backs and goes like this, and you've got a natural V shape here. You see that there? And in the middle of that V, I'm looking at a little bit of deeper water, and oh, I see here mud to rock transition. So I've got mud to rock, a little bit of deeper water, and then we've got weeds and stumps. So again, that will be a real nice area to key in on. And look at this area up here. This is exciting. So we've got all these intakes coming in here. So flow of water. I see all kinds of very, you've got shallow water here in stumps. Probably not too good for your prop on your motor. But what is exciting about this is very shallow, but then all of a sudden you've got this, you see these two bands? There's a band here and a band here. That's a sandbar. So you've got this sandbar. So you're going to have a break on this side and a break on that side. This side is the shallower side. This side is the deeper side. But this sandbar will be a natural attractor, and you could work the brakes on this sandbar on both sides. And in fact, this particular sandbar even has weeds here on the one side. So talk about a fish magnet here. So this sandbar with these weeds and working the brakes would be just a natural spot to fish. So this whole area, prime. In this area, we've got this land point that comes out here. And off of this point, I see rock and rock. So, and I also see deeper water. It's 6, 9, 10, and drops to 14 feet. So you've got nice deep water access, probably lots of structure, and you've got some nice rocks right off of this point. So that would be a nice natural area to fish. Then we come in here. It's really shallow. We've got lots of weeds and shallow water. So in this particular area, I would concentrate on the edge of the weeds on this deeper part right here, 10, 11 foot zone right in here. This area here doesn't look too exciting to me, but when you come out of this bay, as you start to come out, now you're looking at this waterway here, shallow water, 2 feet here, 2 feet there. So now you have like a bottleneck. And that bottleneck are where the fish are going to move in and out of this particular bay. So looking at this bottleneck off of this point, you see how it is underwater point here as well? There's also weeds here, and then it drops to deeper water. So this would be a nice area to fish right in that little bottleneck area off of those weeds and in this deeper 9 to 10 foot zone. Close to the weed beds. Here there's some boulders. So you could actually work close to the weed bed and then start to work out towards the boulder and work that transition. So you're basically covering that bottleneck spot. Working our way along the shoreline, we now come to a nice little interesting area. Off of this point right here, I also see an underwater point with this blue line coming like that. So this point actually comes out. And what do I see on this point? I see mud here. And then it moves over, and then I see weeds off of this underwater point. So we've got a transition from mud to weed, and then as it continues, I see B for boulder. So we've got mud to weed to boulder. So you've got a soft bottom going to weeds, and then from weed, soft bottom, to a hard bottom with boulder. So again, off of this point, I would work this underwater point, and that would be a natural place again for fish to be attracted to and a good place to fish. And oh, if I work my way along here, I see another B for boulder, and I see a little round isolated hump right there. So again, here's mud, here's B for boulder, here's B for boulder. This is a hard rocky area, so you could come out here and concentrate on that one little isolated hump and see if you could pick up some fish. So we continue to move our way along the shoreline here, and oh, look at this area. Oh my, we've got lots of changing depths here, as you can see by all the little squiggly blue lines. Changing depths, there's some obstruction, and there's also weeds. You've got a weed bed right in here. So this, again, would be a great area to fish right in here with those changing depths, and I would work the areas around the outside of the weeds, and on a hot sunny day at high noon, I would go right into the weeds and look for fish. Along this shoreline is also very interesting. Again, you've got the mouth of the river here, which is good. And then you come along and I see an S there for sand. I see more sand here, but then I see mud. So, oh, and I see a G for gravel. So you've got sand, gravel, mud. What an area to fish here. Lots of transition right out from the mouth of the river. You've got this beautiful spot transitioning from sand to mud to gravel. Perfect natural attractor for fish, and you've got deep water access close by. That will be another great place to fish. So everything I talked about on that map, you could follow along on your fish finder as well, following weed transitions or seeing the transition from mud or sand to rock or gravel. You'll notice the bottom of your fish finder, you'll have a thin bottom marking or a thick bottom marking, depending on your fish finder. We'll read it a little differently, but you'll be able to see all of those transitions and those breaks on your fish finder. And when you look at a map, an overall picture, you can start to eliminate water and key in on those areas that are more fish attracting areas, more fish magnets, and you'll have a lot more success on the water. It really isn't that difficult. Just take a look at things rationally and logically, and you'll be able to figure out where those fish are going to be holding, and hopefully make for a great day on the water. I want to thank you for joining me on today's episode of Thundermist Fishing Tips. If you haven't yet, of course, feel free to subscribe. We've got a fantastic family of subscribers. And until next time, good luck and good fishing.